one of the most well-known, most recognized, most acknowledged, most famous, and to Trump and his minions, I guess, one of the most infamous undocumented individuals we have, with a new book, Dear America. Jose Antonio Vargas is here with us at SiriusXM. Jose, how are you, man? Thank you for coming in.
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. So I think you're basically saying that I'm deportable. So what are you trying to say?
Well, I want to talk about that, though.
Yeah.
What is the appropriate terminology? In other words, we've evolved from illegals and aliens. Is undocumented even? Isn't that still somewhat dehumanizing as a term?
Well, first of all, I mean, I think I would love it if Donald Trump and even the New York Times evolved from using the word illegal to refer to people.
Yeah.
They still do.
Right.
I have actually come to the conclusion that I like undocumented because
Really?
Unauthorized, undocumented, because it refers to the fact that I don't have the right legal papers to be here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a part in the book when I talk about this elderly black woman who approached me in North Carolina, and I guess she saw me on PBS, and she came to this event, and she said, "Mr. Vargas, I'm not an immigrant. My ancestors were brought here."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then she pulled out this piece of paper. It was a bill of sale. I'd never seen one before.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Can you connect the piece of paper that my great-great-grandmother got to the pieces of papers that you and your people can't seem to get? This is bigger than papers, young man. Think bigger." So this was 2013. So she really kind of changed the way I thought of what this issue is, in a way that I think, talking about the fact that we don't have papers, I think that's important to connect ourselves to, again, like the arc of American history and who gets to have papers and who decides that and all of that. But then it made me think deeper about, is passing immigration reform, whatever that even looks like, is that all of a sudden going to guarantee that 11 million people in this country feel welcome in this country? In the same way that, right? I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement is basically saying, wait a second, laws are not enough to make black people feel safe in this country.
And to feel citizens.
To feel citizens.
To feel citizens.
So, I mean, so those are, I think, some of the themes that I explore in this book that gets away from the kind of the usual just vernacular that we even talk about this issue. I mean, I really wanted in this book to focus on the psychology of all of this.
Yeah.
Like, what does it feel like?
Right. But another term you use in the book that I've not heard used before, that I think also captures it, and it's bigger than just one group. It applies even to us as African Americans, is homelessness.
Yes.
I don't mind that term. I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
I thought long and hard before using that term. The first person I actually gave the book to was Michelle Alexander after I was done, because I love Michelle's work. I mean, the new Jim Crow fundamentally changed how this country talks about mass incarceration and mass criminalization.
Sure.
So it was really interesting when she read the book and she really connected to that concept of what it means to look for a home, like as a biracial black woman. And this idea again of like what home means for people in this country who are quote unquote marginalized, right? So that was interesting, and that's when I knew that I was in the right direction when she related to it from that way. The goal for me was to write about this issue in a way that other people who may not be undocumented or who may not be an immigrant connects to the issue, right? Connects to, again, the condition of what this is.
Yeah. No, that's very, very important, and I thought about it too. You being Filipino,
Yes.
so it's kind of a double thing, because the face of immigration is still so focused on Latino and maybe probably perhaps Muslim. I mean, they tend to be the most demonized and focused. So it's, a lot of times we overlook where there are commonalities, there are also very unique experiences that people from every cultural background go through. In other words, I'm sure what you go through as Filipino isn't the same as what maybe a Latino or someone from the Middle East would go through.
Mm-hmm.
How often do we talk about the plight of Latino immigrants? Filipino immigrants.
No, we don't.
We know that's just non-existent.
I mean, to me, what's interesting there is Asian immigrants,
right?
Totality are actually the fastest growing immigrant group and the fastest growing racial group,
Mm-hmm.
right? And yet, I think when we talk about race in this country, for the most part, we're kind of left out of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
At least if you think about it, Latinos have always had immigration as a common issue,
Mm-hmm.
right? With Asian people, I mean, it's almost as if we are the foreigners within the foreigners. So that for me too is a part of what the book is about. I mean, there's an entire, kind of section where I talk about Filipinos being the invisible among the invisibles and what that and what that means.
Yeah. For our audience, I don't want to take for granted everyone knows your story, but you came here to live with your grandparents.
So my mother sent me here when I was 12. I woke up one morning in the Philippines and my suitcase was packed and she said I was going to America. Got here when I was 12 and then to live with her parents, my grandparents. And then 4 years later when I was 16, went to the DMV to get a driver's permit, and then that's how I found out that the green card that my grandfather had given me was fake. So this was 1997.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone and everything around me, including the media, right? Like whenever anybody said anything about illegal people, it was always about Mexicans. It was always about Latinos. It was not about us. So I thought I was the only non-Mexican or non-Latino undocumented person in the country.
Right.
But yeah, in the book, I made a very conscious effort to kind of tell the stories of all the people from my high school who helped me out, right? Because the reality is undocumented people in this country could not survive here if there weren't American citizens of all races and backgrounds who help us out. The book is structured as lying, passing, and hiding. So those are the three kind of conditions. Like I feel like I've spent my entire life in this country just lying, passing, and hiding.
And I want to get back to that, but first, your mom. Why'd your mom send you here? What was the circumstance?
She said she wanted to give me a better life. When I was a kid, I didn't really know what that meant. My question was, so why wasn't a better life available in the Philippines? Like, why do I have to go here?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And you probably didn't want to leave your mom.
No.
12 is old enough to know.
12, and not that, and also, she and I were close. We used to share a bed because we lived in a really small place.
Mm-hmm.
And then she told me she was coming, that she'd be following, but she couldn't. Of course, when all the lies that my grandfather concocted all came to the fore, that's when I realized that they lied about everything, right? And I thought, that was kind of my way of, I think it was when my journalism career probably started, because I started kind of asking questions about, wait a second, like why did you send me here?
Mm-hmm.
Why was I smuggled? Why did it cost $4,500? How did you get that money? What did you think was going to happen? My grandfather, his plan was I marry a woman who's a U.S. citizen while working under the table jobs. He wanted me to work as a janitor at a flea market. And then that's when I told my grandfather that I was gay, because I figured
so that wouldn't work.
That would, because I figured you lied about this, so now you want me to lie again, right? But that's when kind of waking up to the reality of what this means and the limitations that it would subject me to. That's when it all became kind of real. Yeah.
And obviously you did become a journalist, but that was even risky, because even in that, it's
so funny. It's funny people say that now. I did not think about it back then. I thought that it would be the safest thing for me to do, because again, I don't have the right papers. Well, why don't I get my name in the paper? That was literally the only reason. And so I thought, if my name was documented on a piece of paper, how can they say that I'm not here? Right.
So when did that become scary, though? Like, did it ever come a point when you realize, okay, wait a minute, my name is out here and I don't have papers?
That was at the Washington Post.
The Washington Post.
When I didn't think I was going to make it that far, right? So it was one thing to work at the local community newspaper where I was covering City Hall and like the fire, whenever a fire happened in the community. It was a whole other thing to be working in Washington, D.C. at the Washington Post. during the post 9/11 era when Bush was president and everybody was suspecting you can't enter a federal building without any sort of ID. Right? And so that's when it became kind of real. But then for me, the savior there was getting to know what DC was. Like, there was the DC that we know from the West Wing. When I was a kid, that was like the show, right? But then there was like the district. There was like Chocolate City. Like, there was like understanding the taxation without representation.
That's right.
Understanding that, you live in this quote unquote most powerful city in the world, and yet all these powerless people in poor parts of the city that, white people don't go to.
Yeah,
right.
right.
So that was really interesting to me. So I gravitated towards kind of covering the other DC.
It reads almost like a suspense thriller. I even see a movie. Y'all do this. No, really, because I think it would let people know what you have dealt with and what many others have to do. I mean, day to day, it's a negotiation.
It's a negotiation day to day.
Of lying past and hiding, so to speak. I mean, and all these evangelicals. I'm a minister, by the way, full disclosure, but I'm not evangelical, obviously. But it's the story of Christ. Hiding, the passing, the moving around to avoid detection because your very life and reality and home that you don't have is in jeopardy. He was a traveler, a sojourner, an immigrant in Egypt, really, when he was hiding from being killed. But that's, to me, the same story. And it's applicable to me. It's always, just like him, applicable to those who are the disinherited, the oppressed, the discriminated against. I mean, that's the metaphor. I don't want to get into a preaching thing, but I mean, to me, my Christianity and Bible is not useful. I believe God is a God of the oppressed, so it's not useful unless we draw the parallel between his experience and yours.
It's interesting you say that. I really struggled with how to talk about God in this book.
Really?
Because there was a part in the book, as you know, that like when I was arrested in Texas, and I was detained and I was put in the cell, and it was really the first time that I wasn't, there was no more hiding, right? Like I was in a jail cell, and I'm, sharing it with these boys, like age 5 to 14. And I just thought of like, is this God's doing? Like, this is what God wanted to see, all these young people. Never mind me, I'm a grown-ass man, and I'm looking at all these boys, and I'm thinking like, what message are we being sent here? Like, what does he or she, what does God want out of this? Right? And I struggled to actually write that in the book, but I couldn't find the language for it. It seemed like I was just, I didn't want to just put God in there, because I think and maybe this is what James Baldwin taught me when I was a kid. I believe that there's a God in people, and that's what we appeal to. Like, when I get a lot of trolls reacting to me, or like some, like random people at airports like, actually just yesterday, it happened yesterday, some guy at the airport was like, "Oh, you're the illegal guy, don't you have a book out?" And I'm like, "Yes, I think it might be at the airport here somewhere." Right? Like that, I have to believe in the God in people, so I don't snap on the guy and be like, "Can you please like not do that?"
Yeah. But again, I don't want to be too you're doing what God wants.
Whoever God is,
you are that in my view, and that's just my humble view, and you can take this or leave it. But in the context of those of us, you mentioned Baldwin, those of us who come out of the Black experience, for whom Christianity became a source of liberation, where it was once a source of oppression, God calls us to resist, and that's what you're doing.
Actually, there's something that happened right after the election. I was giving a talk in upstate New York, and this young man who's a U.S. citizen, he was a college student at this university that I was visiting, and this was right after the election, started talking very publicly in front of all of his classmates about his mom, who's undocumented, who's been here for over 20 years.
Right.
And he was really stressed out that his mother wasn't stressed out. Here he is worrying after the election, what's going to happen to my mom? And the mom said to the son, "Mijo," which means son in Spanish, "Mijo, God has been hiding me for 20 years. He's not going to find me. He being Trump. God has been hiding me for 20 years.
Right.
And of course, the son is like looking at the mom going like, what are you talking about?
Right,
so
right.
her belief that, and, as you know, this in a lot of places of worship across this country, the church has become a real sanctuary for people. And it's the place where undocumented people feel like they're in equal footing with U.S. citizens, where they don't need pieces of papers to justify why they exist. And absolutely, you're totally right, Mark, about, and I know you know this from the book in terms of what reading Baldwin and Toni Morrison as early as they did, like what that did to me.
Yeah, of course. You couldn't turn out any other way.
I couldn't turn out any other way. This is true.
I mean, and Baldwin was, my muse as a teenager myself. Baldwin was one of the most powerful writers of the 20th century. So once you drink from that cup,
it's like a religion.
Yeah, you can't go back to something else. Once that door is opened,
well, I think once he exposes you to what America is,
right.
I think it was, and that's why for me, I was just messaging with his niece on Facebook. I found her on Facebook, and we're now friends.
That's great.
Because I didn't realize that so many schools are not teaching Baldwin anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and so I was reaching out and I said, hey, how can we help with that?
Yeah.
How can we make sure that, that he is available?
Yeah. And that's just
like
another
he was
one
to me when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's just another one of our struggles we have to embark upon and go forward with. Tell people about Define America too.
Yeah.
Please.
So when I came out as undocumented 7 years ago, I knew that my story was only one very specific story. So I started this organization that is really founded on storytelling, right? Like, how do we use storytelling to change the culture in which people talk about this issue? Like, for us, the biggest thing right now actually is how do we get undocumented Black, undocumented Asian, undocumented white stories to complicate what this issue is? So one of the biggest things we do is we consult on actual television shows and movies, right? And so if you, like, for example, Shonda Rhimes, if Shonda wants to put an undocumented medical student in Grey's Anatomy, she contacted us, and then we sent undocumented medical students to the writer's room. And before you know it, there's an entire episode about being an undocumented medical student in Grey's Anatomy. So that for us is a real intervention. So it's a cultural intervention, right? And we didn't know this until after the election, but after the election, there was an article in the New York Times that said that the television show that people watch is a greater indicator than. Ooh, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. Fine. Okay. My phone is fell over. That's fine. That's us. Streaming,
you were. Well, I didn't realize you were going live. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I'm on live. And everything. So
should I start? Where did I go?
No, we got you. It still got the audio.
Oh,
there we go.
Yeah. So I was just saying that we didn't realize that the people you voted for, the greater indicator is the television show that you watch more than your political party. And Grey's Anatomy. So it's the television show that you watch is an indicator of who you voted for more than the political party that you belong to.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
So Grey's Anatomy is apparently one of the top 10 shows that Trump voters watch. So we reached a lot of people by putting an immigrant storyline in Grey's Anatomy.
That's odd.
That's really, well, I mean, hey, I guess,
I had no idea.
I guess, I guess that whole show is relatable to everyone.
Yeah, I guess so. Jose Antonio Vargas, folks, the book here, Dear America. We have to have you back, man, and we'll spend more time together. But this is incredible.
And of course, notes, the subtitle is a nod to Baldwin.
Yeah, it is. Notes of an undocumented citizen who was a refugee himself. He had to go overseas because of
I think a lot about that. Yes.
Yeah. Good to see you, man.
Thank
Keep
you so
up
much
the
for having
great
me.
work. Such an honor to meet you and appreciate
nice
your courage. Are you in peril at any moment of being grabbed?
Yeah, I guess. I'm at Starbucks all the time, so if you want to find me, I'm there.
And he still has the courage to move around, folks, and do what he needs to do. So thank you, man.
Bless
your heart.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
Thank you, gentlemen. That was great.
Thank you.
That was the first time, by the way, that, I mean, it's not a surprise that, I think actually John Lewis is reading it now, and his comms director is saying, Jose, there's a lot of blackness in this book.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it's great.
I said, yes.